Before we begin, take a breath with me. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Good. I'm a doctor by training, a listener by vocation, and a man who once believed his own heart had retired. Then he walked into my life and asked me to show him something simple, how to steady a racing pulse. I couldn't say no. I didn't want to, because sometimes the smallest request opens a door we've kept closed for years. This is a quiet story of two men, a town by the sea, and the slow, safe courage of learning to love again. If stories like this steady your heartbeat, please subscribe. Tap the like button so more people find our little harbor. Leave a comment with a memory of kindness, and share this video with someone who needs gentleness today. And breathe. We'll take this journey slowly, hand in hand. One soft step. I've spent half my life watching people from the chair by the clinic window. If you've ever sat in a waiting room, you know how time stretches, how the coffee tastes of paper cups and nerves, how the clock pretends not to move. As a cardiologist, you learn to see small things, the white knuckles around a clipboard, the way a foot shakes when fear needs an outlet, the silence people keep when they can't decide if words will help or hurt. I was 62 that spring, retired from full-time practice after a long run of years and night calls. I still volunteered twice a week, hosting heart mornings at our little coastal community center, free walks, simple breathing, a place where no one had to pretend. They weren't scared. I like to say it was medicine without the white coat. Just a man with a thermos, a pocket of peppermints, and time. That morning, the ocean looked like an ironed sheet, flat, patient, a promise held in blue. He stood at the doorway scanning faces, looking like someone who had arrived a few minutes early for a performance he wasn't sure he could play in. He wore a sweater a shade darker than his eyes, slate blue, and held his right hand as if it had something important to say, if only it weren't trembling. "Hi," I offered, stepping forward without being too quick, the way you offer a chair to someone who isn't sure if they are allowed to sit. "I'm Ellis." He nodded, the swallow in his throat visible, small as a moth. "Aaron," he said, "I heard you help people with hearts that forget what they're doing." He half smiled, a borrowed joke to cover the doorway between strangers. "I have a rule. Ask one question at a time, and leave enough quiet around the answer so it can land. What would you like to learn today, Aaron?" He glanced down, then back up, meeting my eyes the way men do when they have decided honesty is the quickest bridge across an unkind morning. "Would you show me how to make it slow down?" He touched his chest. "The beating. It races sometimes." There it was, the small request that contains everything. The doctor in me rose like a tide. I couldn't say no. Not to the courage it takes to ask, not to the way his voice held both wind and anchor. "Of course," I said, and gestured to the seat by the window where the light came in soft and left room for breathing. We often talk about the heart as if it needs convincing. In truth, it needs space, room for the lungs' slow bellows to whisper a different rhythm. I handed him a paper cup of water, the ordinary grail of all waiting rooms everywhere, and nodded toward the ocean. "This is going to sound simple," I said. "Simple is often the hardest thing. We're going to breathe in a square." He raised one eyebrow. There was humor living in him. I could see it under the thin layer of worry. "Breathe in a square," he repeated, as if trying on a new coat. "4 in," I demonstrated, holding up my fingers one by one. "Hold for 4. 4 out. Hold for 4. Like tracing the sides with your breath. The body likes predictability. The vagus nerve, a friend we don't thank enough, will often respond to steady rhythm. Like a metronome for the autonomic nervous system." He smiled, and it warmed the room a degree. "I'm a music teacher. I understand metronomes." I felt something in my chest. I've told patients for years that the heart is a muscle that remembers practice. Mine stirred under its old shy habits. Then you already speak the language. We breathed together, two men tracing invisible squares in the light. In through the nose, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Out through the mouth, lips soft like a candle we don't want to blow out, only gently dim, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold again, 1, 2, 3, 4. The trembling in his right hand eased, a tide going out. He looked down at his own chest as if listening to a room he used to avoid. Better? I asked softly. He nodded. It's strange. It feels like I gave it permission. He shook his head, a quiet laugh. I guess I needed someone to tell me it was okay to slow down. Most of us do, I said. We are better at running than resting. But rest is part of the music, too. I paused, the way you leave a comma where someone else can set a word. Would you walk with us today? We go slow. We pay attention to gulls and mailboxes and the miracle of sidewalks. He looked toward the door, then back to me. Yes, he said, as if the word were a slender boat he was willing to try. Our group shuffled into the morning like a small parade of hope. The sea air carried that familiar mix. Salt, wet wood, something green. If you walk near the water long enough, you learn to love the way the horizon is a straight line in a world that rarely is. There were 7 of us that day. Marjorie, who wore a baseball cap over hair she didn't yet have again and told better jokes than anyone. Sam and his husband Douglas, who insisted on holding hands even when the wind was bossy. A widower named Hal with a cane that looked like it had climbed mountains, and me, and Aaron. We moved in the easy way people do when talking is optional. I watched Aaron's shoulders, how gradually they fell from the high place they'd been, keeping. Once, he closed his eyes for 2 steps and tilted his face to the sun. I liked that. It's good when a person lets sunlight make their decisions for a moment. Music teacher, I said as we paused at the pier. What ages do you teach? Adults, mostly, he answered, resting his palms on the wooden rail. People who always wanted to learn but told themselves they were too old. I tell them that isn't a thing. The oldest beginner I ever had was 81. He learned Chopin with a stubborn dignity that would have made the composer proud. Good for him, I said, smiling. I once had a 70-year-old who decided to take up running, ran a 5K in a purple visor with more dignity than the rest of us put together. He glanced sideways at me. Do your patients know you talk like that? Like a poem about sidewalks? I find it calms the blood pressure, I said dryly. He laughed, and it felt like opening a window in a room I had. Kept closed for too many winters. We walked again, and he matched my pace naturally. His step had rhythm. Of course it did, I thought. Music lives in bones. Dead leaves ticked along the curb. Someone's wind chimes argued softly with the breeze. The doctor in me and the man in me have an ongoing conversation. That morning, both agreed, here was someone who carried kindness like a pocket knife, practical, small, and always ready. When we returned to the center, Marjorie handed Aaron a lemon cookie she'd baked. It's medicinal, she claimed. He took it with the reverence appropriate for lemon. Before he left, he turned back, halfway through the door. Would you? He hesitated, a man checking the recipe before proceeding. Would you show me that breathing again? I want to get it right. I led him to the window. Our reflections stood together in the glass. 2 men framed by sky. 4 in, I said, and we traced our square. This time, he counted quietly to himself. I could have stood there the rest of the day. If you've watched this far, take a sip of water. The heart likes hydration, and stories do too. I learned more about Aaron in small servings, the way you learn a favorite restaurant's menu by visiting often. He taught evenings at the elementary, school auditorium, adult piano classes that left him smelling faintly of erasers and optimism. His father, David, had recently moved into an apartment downstairs from Aaron's, a safe arrangement after a minor stroke had stolen, not words, but confidence. I check on him every night, Aaron told me during one of our walks. He pretends he doesn't need it. We both pretend, I guess, but it's a cheerful pretending. We make soup together. He cuts carrots like he's tuning them. Good, I said, picturing knives and careful hands. Routine is a medicine. We began to meet on Tuesdays, unofficially. Sometimes we'd sit on the bench by the bakery and share a croissant gravitationally incapable of staying intact. Sometimes he brought me a piece of sheet music to explain a term. Rubato, he'd say, the music's breath. Sometimes I brought him a diagram of the heart, drawing arrows with my pen while he asked questions with the patience of a person who doesn't mind being new. Is it true that heartbreak can cause real changes? He asked once, touching the paper as if it were a map to a town he'd lost. Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, I said, the long word gentle in my mouth. Stress-induced. It's rare. But yes, the heart is a student of our lives. It remodels. It tries to heal even when healing means being different. And you? He asked softly. Do you have remodeling? The truth is, I hadn't talked about it in years. I do. I was partnered for a long time. Jamie. He died in the winter when the snow wouldn't stop. It was a long time ago. My heart did what hearts do. It learned to carry the weight. Some days it still shifts on my shoulder. He nodded, a man who knows that recognition is a better gift than pity. My mother used to say grief is love with nowhere to go. I try to give it places, soup, music, that sort of thing. I watched him, the way he arranged his face when talking about complicated things, like lining up sheet music on a windy day, one hand always ready to keep the measures from flying. And though I am careful by nature, though my life had become the practice of sitting with other people's pain without making it mine, I felt something in me step forward. A new student, attentive. I didn't notice the community center's flyer at first. It was pinned to the corkboard between yoga and the lost and found list. Thursday night social, live band, beginners welcome. The picture was all kinds. Of wrong, 2 teenagers in a prom pose, but the spirit of the thing was right. I told myself I would go if I could get out of my chair when the evening came. When I mentioned it, Aaron surprised me by saying, I used to love to dance. Then he hesitated, a door creaking in a house he knew well. I haven't in a long time. Me neither, I admitted. But there's an epidemic of unused dance floors in this country. Maybe we should be responsible citizens. He laughed. That's the most doctor way of inviting someone to dance I've ever heard. I shrugged. I try to be preventative. On Thursday, the band tuned with the earnestness of men who also coached soccer. The gym had been softened with strings of lights and the confidence of folding chairs. Aaron wore a shirt the color of new leaves, sleeves carefully rolled. I thought he looked like spring had borrowed a person. We stood near the wall for 2 songs, nodding in rhythm the way cautious men do. Then a waltz began, and Aaron turned to me with that same bravery he'd shown in my waiting room. Would you show me? He asked. I feel like I've forgotten how. I couldn't say no. Not to the trust in his voice, not to the way the music reached out a hand and patiently waited for us to take it. Left foot forward, then to the side, then together. I reminded, my palm open. He placed his hand in mine, warm. My other hand went to his shoulder blade, familiar despite years. We moved and our bodies remembered. It wasn't elegant, thank goodness. Elegance is for glass shelves. This was something else, the gentle logic of steps, the way moving in circles tricks the brain into thinking time can be persuaded. I've got you, I said quietly, the words for both of us. He looked up then, eyes and mouth softened by the particular relief of being guided. We didn't talk. Around us, a dozen small stories spun. Someone's niece clapped off beat. A grandmother in silver sneakers outdanced two teenagers with the concentration of a hawk. And we, two men in a town that knew our names, learned how to make space for each other's feet. When the song ended, we didn't immediately let go. Then we did, politely, like men who understood that good things deserve boundaries so they can be trusted again next time. "I want to learn more," he said, as we walked to the table where a volunteer guarded a bowl of strawberries. "Would you show me again? Another time?" "Yes," I said, and felt the word find a chair in my chest and sit down comfortably. If there is a moment when a life tilts, it often happens in a kitchen. People ask me what it feels like when a heart changes its mind. I tell them, imagine someone you care about standing in your house, opening the right cabinet on the first try. That's the sound. That's the shift. A week after the dance, I brought over a pot of lentil stew, the medicine of my youth, onions, cumin, a squeeze of lemon at the end to invite everyone to be their best self. Aaron answered the door with a dish towel over his shoulder, a rehearsal for a life I had carefully excused myself from for a long time. "Kitchen," he pointed, and I followed. His father's radio murmured news in the other room, a low blanket of voices. On the counter, a wooden spoon rested, like an old faithful oar. We moved around each other with the practiced caution of two men who have spent years making space for other people. It felt surprisingly natural. He showed me where the mugs lived. I filled the kettle. He set out bowls. We made space, the verb. That saves more arguments than apologies ever will. "Excuse me?" "You first." "I'll get it." His father, David, was tall, his hair a polite cloud. He introduced himself as if he were welcoming me to a ship he captained. "Ellis," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that told time the important parts. "Thank you for coming. We are practicing normal. It's trickier than it looks." "Normal is an opinion," I replied, and he warmed to me instantly. We ate. We talked about nothing and everything, the way coastal paint peels faster than expected, the loyalty of small hardware stores, the universal law that soup improves all stories. At one point, Aaron touched my wrist to get my attention before asking a question, and I noticed how my body reacted with a quiet yes. A small deer turning, alert, but unafraid. After dinner, he asked me to stay while he walked his father through evening medications. "Just to make sure I'm doing it right," he said, the teacher ready to learn. It was my turn then. Trust is a two-person operation. "I can sit here," I offered gently, gesturing toward a chair by the door. "I'd hate to make the kitchen feel like a clinic. But if you want to show me, I'm here." He nodded, gratitude the shape of his eyes. He picked up the pill organizer like a conductor's baton and walked his father through the simple choreography. "This one for blood, pressure. The little white one is a statin, Dad. The oval is for nerves you don't need to pay attention to tonight." David obeyed with good humor. "He's a kind nurse," he confided to me in a stage whisper. "A stubborn one, too," Aaron added, smiling. I watched him kneel slightly to see his father's face better, how he never rushed even when his own. Breathing quickened. There are things you can't fake in a kitchen at 9 at night. Care is one of them. When I left, Aaron walked me to the door. The hallway light gave everything a softness I wanted to memorize. "Thank you," he said, "for not taking over, for letting me show you and not making me feel like a kid." "Adults are just kids with better stories," I told him. "You're doing well." He held my gaze a moment too long to call it casual. "Ellis," he said, voice low, as if asking me to keep a secret for him. "Would you show me how to rest? I forget, and sometimes I don't remember that I've forgotten." I could have made a joke. I could have deflected. Instead, I nodded. "Yes, but it might be unglamorous." "I'll risk it," he said. "Here is the kind of homework I assign these days. Drink water, Go slow on purpose. Put a book on your chest and watch it rise and fall like a small boat. Find the softest thing in the room and hold it for 15 seconds. When in doubt, count to 4. Aaron took to it the way good students do, with sincerity and occasional rebellion. He sent a message one afternoon. Practiced breathing during a staff meeting. Survived a dispute about copier paper. Victory. Another day. Counted my steps to the mailbox. Forgot what number I was on because of a squirrel. Acceptable? Acceptable, I replied. Squirrels invalidate all math. We built rituals that didn't draw attention, but did their work. We named our stress on paper napkins and folded them into paper boats. We left them on the tide line, watched the ocean read them without judgment. He taught me to hear the difference between a piano tuned for performance and one tuned for comfort. I taught him the difference between quiet and numbing. Both are silence. Only one is kind. There were moments, of course, when the complicated machine of life tried to throw a wrench into the gears. One evening, his father had a dizzy spell. Aaron's message was practical but laced with worry. Paramedics came. Low blood sugar. He's sleeping. I'm making tea. Would you mind telling me how to not pace a hole in the floor? I called. Sometimes a voice works better than any pill. Listen to me, I said softly while the kettle clicked in his background. 4 in, hold, 4 out, hold. You are not alone. I know, he said as if tasting the words for truth. Say it again. You are not alone. That night when I hung up, I sat in my own kitchen next to the plant that should have died last winter but didn't, and let my heart acknowledge the simple thing. I wanted this man safe. I wanted this man happy. I wanted to be the person he called at midnight for figments and facts. I am a cautious man. Still, some desires step onto the scale and balance evenly. Not too much, not too little, just right. Illness has a way of inserting itself into the script. David had a minor stroke in early summer. The call came a little after dawn, when a day can still be saved from panic. It's me, Aaron said, and my name in his mouth felt like a rope thrown across water. Ambulance. He's talking, but he's confused. I'm on my way, I said. The doctor part of me knows exactly where to stand and when to move. The man part of me was already out the door. In the emergency department, the lights were brighter than necessary. I found him in a plastic chair, his elbow on his knee, his hand covering his mouth as if to keep words from escaping unsupervised. I touched his shoulder and felt the twitch of a startle before the relief. You came, he said, half in wonder. Of course, I said. You asked. I couldn't say no. It wasn't heroism. It was simple math. When someone you love is in the one fluorescent place in town, you show up. We did what you do. We answered questions. We nodded through explanations I could have given myself. I made sure no one was assuming comprehension without checking. I left the room when the neurologist needed space and stood in a hallway that smelled like disinfectant and bravery. Aaron joined me, the door whispering closed behind him. I don't know how to do this, he said, thumb and forefinger pressing the bridge of his nose, that universal human gesture for, please, world. You're doing it, I said. You already are. Pause. Drink water. I handed him the bottle I carried because I carry water the way other men carry wallets. Breathe. He did. He leaned against the wall, exhaling long enough to make me proud. Then he looked at me with everything unguarded. Would you show me where to stand? He asked. Like, not metaphorically, in there. I don't want to be in the way. I want him to see me and feel safe. This is where my two lives help each other. I guided him to a spot at the head of the bed, by David's left side. Here, I said. This is where he can see you without turning. Keep your voice as familiar as you can make it. Tell him what's happening in one sentence at a time, and keep your sentences true. He nodded. True, he repeated, the word turning into a small lamp between us. The night took its time. It didn't take anything else. We were lucky. A clot busted by a timely drug, a brain that decided this was only a warning, not an ending. By morning, David's confusion had shifted to the irritable wisdom of a man who hates hospital gowns. He looked at his son and at me and pronounced, "Well, that was unnecessary," which in our language meant thank you, thank you, thank you. When I drove Aaron home hours later, the sky was the honest gray of fatigue. He stared out the window, his hand open on the console. I wanted to take it. I didn't. Boundaries are like guardrails. You are grateful for them, especially on turns. On the porch, he turned to me, eyes rimmed with the bright red of men who have earned their tears. "Would you stay?" he asked. Not a plea. Not a trap. A request made by someone who has learned that asking is a kind of love. "Yes," I said. "I will sit in the chair by the couch and pretend to read the same paragraph for an hour. I will tell you to sleep, and I will mean it." He sank onto the couch. I put on water for tea and watched the steam write cursive on the sunlight. The house exhaled. So did I. Recovery is boring. That is one of its secret miracles. If you are lucky, rehabilitation looks like Thursday, then looks like Monday, then looks like the most ordinary Wednesday you can imagine. David learned joy in small completions. A puzzle piece that mattered, a button conquered without swearing, the stride between couch and kitchen growing confident again. Aaron learned to schedule his own life around the simple engine of care. I learned that our lives had begun to braid together in ways that felt less like an accident and more like permission. He would text me a picture of a pear at the grocery store with the caption, "Which one looks like I know what I'm doing?" I would swing by after my walk with a bag of clementines because the world is gentler with citrus. We set out chairs in the backyard and surrendered to the absurd theater of sparrows. The town grew tomatoes. The sea kept its counsel. On Sundays, when the light in late afternoon turns into compassion itself, we sat and shared family stories. Like a pair of old men on a porch swing we hadn't yet installed. One evening, while David watched a baseball game with the seriousness of a judge, Aaron and I sat at the kitchen table, the map of our conversations spreading like a breakfast newspaper. He told me about the first time he touched a piano in public. 12 years old, shaking his mother's hand on his shoulder, saying, "Everybody trembles. Give yours a job. Press the keys." I told him about my first night on call as a young doctor, when my attending nodded at me and said, "You're ready." How I went into the stairwell and breathed until ready, decided to meet me halfway. He looked at me then, full on, not the sideways glances of our earlier days. "Ellis," he said, "would you show me what you're afraid of?" I am a man who collects honesty. I keep it in jars in my chest to open when the air gets stale. "I'm afraid," I said, "of being given a happiness I cannot protect." He sat back, eyes soft. "I can't promise we won't break things," he said, "but I can promise we will be gentle with the breaking." I nodded, swallowing around the pebble that names itself as it goes down. Hope. The day we kissed, the weather was ridiculous. Rain that appeared pleased with its profession, streets shining like someone had polished them, a sky full of useful gray. I had brought over soup again. I am nothing if not consistent. Aaron had made bread, which is alchemy we are still under-proud of in this world. We ate until restraint called us both by name. David had gone to bed early, tired in the way bodies announce without apology. The house settled, floorboards secreting ancient wisdom, "Be still." We stood at the sink with our elbows touching, washing. Dishes in the choreography of a long-married couple we were not and might never be. And yet, sometimes life rehearses you for roles you didn't audition for. He dried the last bowl without looking at it, as if eyes would confuse the truth. "I keep wanting to ask you," he said, voice careful, "and I keep being kind to my wanting instead. But I am tired of only being kind. I want to be brave, too." I turned to him slowly. "Ask." He inhaled, taught by weeks of practice, and let the breath out like a note he had tuned. Would you show me how to be with you? There it was the question built of smaller questions. Can I touch you? Will this be safe? Will we be good to each other's scars? I have to tell you. For honesty's sake, I was afraid, not of him, of the size of my yes. But fear has never been a stop sign. At its best, it's a speed bump. I stepped closer so he could change his mind if he wanted to. He didn't. He lifted his hand, his right, the one that trembled that first day, and placed it on my cheek as if it were learning a new instrument. I felt the tremor, not as a symptom now, but as a signature. Him. Slow, I encouraged. Not because we had to, because we could. We kissed the way a good book begins, patiently, with detail, trusting the reader to stay. No fireworks, thank the saints of blood pressure. Instead, the solid, miraculous feeling of being known and not found lacking, of being met. When we parted, we laughed, the kind that doesn't travel far because it's heavy with relief. He pressed his forehead to mine, a practice I recommend to anyone who can try it. Okay, he whispered, the syllables like a landing. Okay, I said back. The house sighed. The rain approved. After changes are sometimes more important than firsts. After our kiss, we did not rush to rename everything. We did what men who have lived long enough to make mistakes do. We practiced. We scheduled gentleness. We respected doorways. We trusted silence to do part of the talking. We allowed ourselves laughter without apology, grief without shame, and tender curiosity without a stopwatch. He would ask permission before he reached for my hand when we walked. May I? And I would answer with a smile that meant yes. Yes, yes. At the grocery store, we learned the dangerous aisle where everything is crunchy and shaped like a circle. We risked it and lived to crunch again. On mornings when I woke early out of habit, I wrote him a short letter on a sticky note and left it where his eyes would find it like a small sunrise. I would be lying if I said there wasn't fear. I tell you this because I am a doctor, and we tell people the truth gently. Fear is part of the package of any heart that tries again. When a late bill arrived and temporary confusion turned into a raised voice, we took a walk without solving anything. And only after the ocean had read us its litany of waves did we try again and find what we needed to say. Thank you for staying, he told me after that. It felt weird. I wanted to run the way I always have. You just... He gestured, not finding the word. I offered it. Breathed. He nodded, grateful. Yes, you breathed. I do not know the exact day the town began to include us as one of its ordinary pairs. Maybe the morning the lady at the bakery started putting 2 lemon cookies in one bag without asking. Maybe when David greeted me in the hallway with, "Son," and didn't seem to realize he had used a word with more layers than usual. Maybe when a little girl on the beach asked if we were brothers and we answered, in perfect unplanned chorus, something like that. This is what I want to tell anyone watching whose heart is tired. Love at our age is not a second adolescence. It is not loud. It does not try to impress. It is a room with chairs that fit, light that flatters truth, and a thermostat set to reasonable. It is a willingness to ask, "Would you show me?" and to delight in answering, "Yes, of course. Come see." The idea came on a Tuesday like so many good things. We were walking by the center after leading our usual group when Aaron stopped, his teacher brain mid-spark. "What if," he said, "we put our things together? Our things? Your heart mornings? My music evenings? A class where people learn to breathe and then to play. Or to play while breathing. A space for people who think they are too old to begin. We could call it Hearts and Steps. Or Hearts, if we wanted to embarrass ourselves." I grinned at the terrible pun that was somehow perfect. "Hearts and Steps," I said. We teach people what we've been learning. That fall, we hung a flyer. Not the prom poses. A photo of a metronome next to a stethoscope. A cup of tea behind them both, steam like handwriting. Gentle movement, gentle music. No experience necessary. Come as you are. Leave with a song in your pocket and a breath you can trust. On. The first night, 12 people arrived. Some couples, some alone. Marjorie brought cookies again, cementing her position as class mother. We began with box breathing. We hummed instead of sang at first, low and easy, because humming smooths the nervous system like a hand on a startled horse. We practiced waltz steps in socks. We laughed when feet got ideas without permission. We grew a community where not being perfect was the only ticket for admission. After class, a man I recognized from the pharmacy aisle came up to us, holding his own rhythm in his palm like an egg. "I've been alone a long time," he said, not looking at either of us in particular because looking straight at love is sometimes too bright. "Tonight felt like my house got a window." "We're here next Tuesday," I told him. "And the Tuesday after that." Aaron squeezed my hand under the table where we kept the music sheets. Our lives had become wider than our bodies, and it felt exactly right. Years later, yes, we are allowed the future. I still sit sometimes in the chair by the window at the community center. The ocean still irons itself most mornings. Our group has grown. David sits among them, his cane a baton for silent orchestras, calling me son in a voice that has made peace with many seasons. Aaron and I argue over how to stack the folding chairs and delight in the practice of being wrong. He still asks me every so often, in that tone made of trust and invitation, to show him something. A better way to tie a scarf against the wind. The trick of chopping onions without surrendering to tears, the path to the bench that gets the best winter sun. And I still say yes, not because it is my duty, but because it is my joy. And on evenings when the rain rehearses on the roof, when the kettle agrees to sing, when the house reminds us with its little creaks that staying is its own music, we stand at the sink with elbows touching. We wash dishes in a choreography that surprises me with its quiet rightness. He dries the last bowl. I turn off the tap. He leans his shoulder into mine, a small, ordinary anchor that has taught me more than any textbook would. "You show me," he asks, and every time the sentence is different. Every time the question is the same. "Will you meet me here?" I could not say no. And I do not want to. If you've made it to this point, take a breath with us. 4 in, hold, 4 out, hold. Consider whose hand you might take, what question you might ask, what kindness you might allow. The heart has rooms that have not yet been opened. The keys are simple. They fit in your palm. They fit in your life. The ocean outside keeps its straight line. We walk beside it, not in a hurry, practicing the only 2 steps that matter in the end, learning and love. And when he turns to me on the pier, eyes ocean blue or storm slate, voice like a new song and an old promise, and asks what he always asks, I answer what I always will. Yes, of course. Come see.